Hi there, welcome to this KOIN NOW special edition. I have Elizabeth Dinh with me. I'm meteorologist Josh Cozart, and we're going to be kind of breaking down exactly what is still happening, the devastating sights down in California. So really kind of a somber moment for our friends down in the Los Angeles area. This is something we've been talking about pretty much since, what was that, Tuesday?
Tuesday morning. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So this is day 3. And if you go back to Tuesday morning, it was around 10:30, I believe, when that fire was first reported. The first fire, because now we're up to 5 fires, right? And that first one, I remember just within a couple of hours by 12:30, they said it had just ballooned to 200 acres. And then we saw other fires kind of start. There was a second, third, and tonight the latest is that there's 5. And Josh, the thing is, it's the conditions, right? It's this time of year, it's rare, but also those Santa Ana winds were just so much more powerful than normal.
And of course, when we were talking about the Santa Ana winds, that's something that we typically associate with the month of September, October, kind of the driest part of Southern California's time span. And we're going to go ahead and just kind of give you an inside look of exactly where these fires are currently burning. We've also, right below us, it's black at this moment, but we do have a live helicopter chopper. Of course, a lot is going on down there.
Yes.
So we're kind of getting and losing some of that, as well as I kind of track us back here into frame.
The webcam is doing its own thing.
Yeah.
It's a little smart, showing my water bottle, staying hydrated.
Staying hydrated.
But yeah, so that, it looks like it's black, but to go off of what you were saying, so this is a feed from KTLA, our sister station with our Nexstar, which is the company that we work for, our sister station KTLA in the Los Angeles area. That's one of their helicopters that's flying around, and so the signal can be spotty, of course, with the cell signal, but hopefully it'll pop up soon. The latest is that it looked like they were on a yard. They were close up on a yard of a home maybe, and there were some firefighters all around there. So hopefully that'll come back soon, and we're just trying to give you the latest live look right there. And then we were talking about the 5 different fires, Josh. That's that map you have right here. If you can talk about, how, when you look at why there's that big Palisades fire, that first one, and how you were telling me all it takes is for just a little ember to just fly over and it could spark something else.
And it basically jumps from location to location. So that's kind of what we've seen as of late, kind of that sunset fire. Out towards the Hollywood Hills that started again yesterday. You actually brought it to my attention. You said, I'm seeing reports of another fire. And so that one potentially may have been sparked from maybe the Eaton fire, blowing embers, keeping them alive for miles. And then one of those live embers falls over an area of dry brush, and then a brand new one starts. And it quite literally spreads like wildfire for us.
We don't know for sure if all of these fires started that way, but it's certainly interesting to keep in mind when you were telling me that may have been the possibility. And I thought, okay, that might make sense, because remember, you were saying the winds have calmed down quite a bit today compared to this time yesterday. I believe they were still a bit powerful, so it was quite feasible. And then they might have like smaller fires that start up too. So it's real interesting. I also heard today, because there was one where there's this tower, right? And it was going up the hill, and that a lot of times the fires can just rush up a hill versus down a hill. And it has to do with below the fire, it's kind of building its own heat.
Which then drives the fire to go up, because if you're cooking and the steam rises, it's the same deal. The hot air is rising, so it's going to force that fire to kind of climb up. Now, on the flip side, what really makes it challenging for fire crews is you get those valley breezes and the mountain breezes to get intertwined. So with the cooler overnight temperatures, that cold air, it likes to sink. So once it actually starts to sink, that really kind of creates a lot of that issue as well, where then the fire's running back down the mountainside. So it's basically like you are chasing the fire constantly, with it going up the hill and then down the hill.
And that's rugged terrain. And obviously they're in the Los Angeles area. That one that I told you about a little more than 24 hours ago was in like that Runyon Canyon Park area, a very popular area for people to hike. It's rugged terrain. Obviously people like to hike it. Then down below there's a lot of homes, there's streets. So a lot of challenges, whether it's down by the city or up in that rugged terrain, for these firefighters to get there, then to battle it strategically, then the conditions. So it's challenging on so many levels.
And even from a mental standpoint, I mean, a lot of these fire crews are going into this saying, is this house worth worth saving now, or should we jump to another one
right.
and try to protect it before it goes up in flames? So I can only just imagine the mental stress of this situation.
Offense or defense at this point, but on a bigger scale, instead of just a house, this is something much bigger.
Yeah, we're talking about, we've got reports of several schools being burnt,
yes.
some iconic movie and film locations. We're talking about Los Angeles, where all of our media is produced.
And we were saying how, and you guys may have heard this too, there are a lot of Hollywood stars, celebrities, and people that a lot of us grew up watching on movies and TV shows who've lost their homes. Billy Crystal and his wife had lived in their home since 1979. They raised their kids there. They lost everything. And then there aren't just celebrities and well-known people. There are people we heard in our newscast. One man who's like, hey, I'm just a working guy. You know, I'm not wealthy at all. So please keep in mind that we are also impacted by this. So a lot of the headlines might note the celebrities, but people from all walks of life are impacted and their livelihoods are gone. Like people whose kids went to school and then later they're like, my school's gone, my home's gone. And so even these families are having trouble trying to explain. I can't imagine. Like, we don't know where we're going to go because even mom and dad don't have the answer tonight.
And I mean, for us, it's hard to imagine, but we know that maybe some of you out there have gone through this. Back in 2020, Western Oregon really experienced this same situation. In that case, a lot of the fire crews from California came up here to help us. Now we're returning the favor. We've had reports on our newscast earlier in the day where, the Red Cross fire crews piling up as much gear as they possibly can, driving down I-5 and trying to really help out our friends in the Los Angeles area. And
I remember you weren't here in Portland just yet, but you followed it very closely because you were in another part of Oregon at that time as a meteorologist, right?
Yeah.
And I was here, and it was chilling in that, for those of us who were here and you were following it, how we look at those high winds, we talked about hurricane force winds, that was very similar to what we had in 2020. Very powerful winds, and the concern before everything unfolded was that, if something goes wrong, it's going to go wrong quickly. And that's exactly what happened, sadly, because it's like taking a hairdryer, right?
Yeah.
And then just blowing it onto a flame on some very dry tinder, and it's just going to take off. So in some ways we do relate to that. And then the troublesome part with the LA is how densely populated it is, and that's why we're seeing so much more destruction.
Absolutely. That's kind of key to it, because a lot of these fires right now, the size of them, roughly Manhattan size, just to kind of give you a perspective. And just imagine if a fire tore through Manhattan, the devastation. That's basically what we're seeing here in the Los Angeles area, just tearing through the Palisades neighborhood, just completely demolishing it, and unfortunately leaving us with sites like this, just the chimney stacks.
The chimney, which is able to withstand the heat, and that's about it, and everything else that could not is absolutely gone. And you hear people saying that's, those are the memories. Like Paris Hilton said that her son, the home that she lost, that's where he took his first steps. And so I think there's a mixed feeling for those who are going through that loss of, thankfully we are okay as individuals, but we lost places that were near and dear to us that we can't back, where there are family heirlooms and relics that we don't know if we'll get back. But on that sad side, as I said, I think it's kind of a mixed feeling of people who lost their homes. They do feel like at least we're okay, because we are now learning that 7 people have died. And so there were 5 in that one fire and then 2 in another is the latest count. But officials there are even saying, look, it's too soon to go through the rubble at this point. They're still having to attack the fires. Sadly, that number might even climb even higher. So it's just so heartbreaking.
And our sister station, we were talking a little bit earlier, KTLA, down in Los Angeles, mentioning that maybe they are investigating at least one of these fires as a potential arson.
Yeah, I wanted to pull that up. Let me take a look at where I had that on my phone here.
Yeah. And again, we were speculating, as one can only do so, with the gusty winds. I had someone ask me yesterday, well, was it the fire that started first or was it the wind? It was the winds that started, and then it didn't take much for a spark to then rapidly spread, and that just kind of created the snowball effect. And very similar to us in 2020, where we had those gusty winds on Labor Day. It took down a lot of power lines.
Yes.
That started the fire, and then the wind just sped up the fire process.
And I've seen some of those reports and speculation out there of it could have been power lines. Again, a densely populated area. There are tons more power lines than would have been in Oregon in 2020 because it's the less populated area that we're comparing this to. But that's certainly one factor because it would make sense. But could it be an arsonist? And then there's multiple fires. So I know that the investigators will have a lot of work ahead of them that they can't even get to just yet. The latest from KTLA is that a possible arson suspect arrested tonight near the Kenneth Fire. And I believe the Kenneth Fire is one of the newer ones, if I'm correct, that started maybe yesterday or today.
And definitely not one of the large 5 that we've kind of been honing in on.
Right?
Yeah.
This one is near homes in Calabasas and West Hills area. So around 4:30 tonight. So about 4 hours ago, LA police went to reports of a man trying to light a fire in one area. And the people there, according to KTLA, spotted the suspect. They actually held him down as the officers got there, and there are pictures there that show the arrest of this person and officers surrounding a home. So at this point, obviously officials aren't saying for sure, is this guy responsible for something? They just say a possible arson suspect. And once again, I'm sure the people there and many of us watching would like to know answers, how it started, who's responsible, but you know, it's still early. It's going to take some time to figure that out. We can only just guess at this point.
And I think a big takeaway, too, is how it started, not necessarily important right now. The fire crews are working so diligently to just try to extinguish and get some sort of containment around these fires as rapidly as they can.
Are conditions getting better and better, at least, or is there a chance things will pick up in terms of wind and other things that would impact this, Josh?
Yeah, so we can basically kind of look, and I'll take this full just so we get a better idea. So right now our wind speeds still kind of out of the north-northeast. So that means there are still those Santa Ana winds that move up and over the Sierra Nevadas. As they do so, they descend into a desert-like area that dries out the winds even more, warms them up, and then they're channeled through these very narrow pathways, these valleys and canyons that then really expedite the winds into the downtown Los Angeles area, much of the Los Angeles metro area. So at least right now seeing some improvements with the winds, but Chino's still at 16.
Wow.
We're still seeing 15-mile-per-hour gusts. Of course, this is a far cry and a far different picture than what we were experiencing just even earlier today. We had gusts upwards of 65 miles per hour yesterday. We were tipping the scale over 100-mile-per-hour winds, so it's not surprising that we were seeing conditions like this. And I really kind of like to show this image as well. Do you see those soft glowing?
Yeah.
That's the fire. It's burning so hot.
That's the fire that you can get it from space, and you can even see that. That's intense. And those are two, I believe that's the Palisades fire, and then is it the Eaton fire is the other one?
I believe so.
And if I'm correct, as I check my notes here, but those are the two fires that have sadly claimed lives. Yeah, those are the two largest ones. The Eaton fire destroying more than 5,000 structures. And then in the Palisades fires, that's the one that's further on the east. That one, more than 5,300. So we're talking more than 10,000 structures. Many of them are homes, but this does include schools, churches, synagogues, businesses. And then we learned that today 2 more people had died as well, so bringing the death toll now to 7. But there is concern that there are people who sadly didn't make it out, and they're not going to know till later. And then I want to add, too, there had been talk of an NFL game, and we found that out, too. The Vikings and Rams playoff game is going to go to Arizona instead because of that. So at this point, they're still going to play the game. It's just not going to happen in the Los Angeles area. I mean, just one of many events impacted in big ways by this.
In very, very big ways. And I want to bring in one of our Facebook comments. Sandy Woodruff is just saying devastating. I feel like that's the only emotion that we can have, especially seeing these images, seeing some of the reports of people just completely heartbroken of their everything that they know and love their entire life just gone within a day.
Yeah, and one of our colleagues was saying that she's got a relative who they found out, at least they think at this case, was that their home is okay on a street that's been heavily destroyed. And to try to put ourselves in their shoes, I can't imagine that either, because, you know, you'd come back and maybe your home is spared, but your neighborhood isn't the same. And so it would be so heartbreaking that your neighbors don't have their place, and that must, you know, bring you a range of emotion as well, because it doesn't feel like home anymore. But also on that part, Josh, you know, we've seen these reports of how the fires can move that way. And I look at that to when I've covered tornadoes, and it'll be the same way. You go up to a street and it's all these structures, these houses are just gone. and then a few that just seem untouched. In fact, that happened to my neighborhood, the house that I lived in, and this was in around 2000, 2001. And I remember I was just like, oh my gosh, we were spared, but just down the street, some of these homes were destroyed. Can you talk about that from a weather standpoint, how whether it's tornado, hurricane, or even these fires fueled by wind, how that can be the case, and that too makes it difficult to predict the path.
And I think even once all of the aftermath comes to fruition, I've seen reports of even celebrities who say, one house, and we relate to these celebrities because they're names that we know. It's more impactful. We know that a lot of these celebrities have wealth, but there's so many more people who don't have wealth who are impacted. But we use the celebrities, that way we can kind of get that human aspect. And having survivor's guilt of saying, I'm the only house left. Unfortunately, it's just unpredictable. At least what we can do in the case of fires here in particular is that defensible space. Eliminating any of the brush, any of the landscape away from your house, feet upon feet. And we've seen here in Oregon that has the potential to elevate your chances of fire crews being able to maybe laying down some retardant to help prevent the fire from moving overhead. That has been beneficial. And again, it's very unpredictable.
That's a good reminder too, though, because we know that for January, for this to happen, that's a rare thing for people who live there or follow the weather and conditions there. You were saying when we started this live stream that it's around September they might see this kind of thing, not January. So that's what's fascinating now, that even firefighters who watch this closely, they don't call it a fire season, they call it a fire year. And that makes me think of here, this past summer, while the Portland metro area didn't get hit by those wildfires like we saw in 2020. We do know many other parts of the state got hit historically bad.
Some of the worst fire season we've seen.
Yeah, and so that makes me think that it's a reminder for all of us, right? Try to have that go back, whether that is something on the level of what we're seeing now, these widespread wildfires, or it could just be an emergency in your own home, in your situation, right? It couldn't hurt to just be prepared. I think maybe when we're feeling so lost amid such devastation, is there something that we can do? And I hope that will help all of us to be prepared. Do you have like a little medications checklist and little
water,
a go bag, that you can just pack and have it ready near your door, in your car, whatever, and that way, should something come up, then you're able to grab that and go, because we would love to take everything, but we can't. And I know that a lot of people who live in the LA area tend to be prepared, so they were able to take their things, but that's not everybody's case. So,
and a lot of the times it happens so quickly, that's why it's a grab and go bag.
Right.
Because it is just a moment's notice that you just have to grab it and evacuate immediately. I do want to show, at least, just as we're kind of relating everything to us here in the Pacific Northwest, every single Thursday our drought monitor is updated. So right now, the I-5 corridor, most of the Pacific Northwest, kind of steering clear of any drought, and even those yellow patches that you see, including parts of the Deschutes County Bend, east of the Cascades. Technically, that's not drought, it's just abnormally dry. But still, a much better place than where we have seen ourselves, especially when we talk about the summer months. So there have been improvements, but when we look at the latest update in regard to California, just from yesterday's update, Los Angeles down to San Diego went from just the moderate drought up to the severe drought. And it's basically a flash drought. And Larry O'Neill does a really, really good job here in Oregon. He's our climatologist, explaining that a flash drought is because of those Santa Ana winds in the case of Southern California. They're so hot, they're so dry, and they're so rapid, they instantly dry out the landscape. So thus giving us the moderate now to severe category of drought that we're seeing.
So it was like I was saying, like that hot, or that hair dryer, if you had a giant hair dryer, it's just drying out everything faster than usual because of that. And you interviewed him recently.
I did. I actually talked with Larry O'Neill earlier today, and we actually have a little bit of a clip of that, so we'll go ahead and give you a little bit of insight of how all of these wildfires could potentially be relating to us here in Oregon. Take a look. Some of the most impactful images coming from the Pacific Coast Highway as people evacuated burning neighborhoods were forced to abandon their cars. And the bulldozers had to move the cars out of the way. The state of Oregon climatologist Larry O'Neill says that's exactly the kind of problem large cities in Oregon need to be ready to contend with should wildfires strike in heavily populated areas.
It's really getting the importance of the message. If you have a very fast fire coming into an area, is really getting that information to people as quickly as possible, to leave as quickly as possible. That's one aspect of it. The other is basically also having routes for evacuation that you can, that people aren't just jammed up in.
O'Neill says he'll be focused on 3 things this upcoming wildfire season in Oregon. First is the high elevation snowpack, which is already very good. It not only keeps the landscape moist from May to June, but also slows the drying out of vegetation.
Reducing that vegetation growth gives less fuel to the fire later in the summer.
Second is not just a wet spring, but the amount of rain in May and early June. And finally, avoiding early heat waves.
Those early season heat waves basically dry out the landscape too early. And that actually, I think, is one of the most important indicators for wildfire risk is whether we get these early season heat waves or not.
Yeah, just it really kind of puts it all into perspective for us as well, to be able to relate that type of situation with what we're going on here. And even with some of those images of the bulldozers going through and just kind of clearing the roads, that gives us a good idea. While we can't fix it like turning on a light switch, but our infrastructure needs to be able to withstand a mass exodus, whether that be a wildfire or the big one, the earthquake that we so frequently talk about.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking because the reports early on, that I believe that was on Tuesday when things first happened, there was actor Steve Guttenberg was making this plea, and he was telling people who'd left their cars because it just got so gridlocked and they just had to leave their cars because they couldn't go, so they just ran away or walked away. But then he was concerned that the firefighters couldn't get up, or people who were trying to leave couldn't get down. So he was saying, leave your car keys in there and I'll move them. I don't think a lot of people heard his message in time, because then we saw the bulldozers, like you said, and then they just started moving the cars out themselves. So that's pretty heartbreaking. And it made me think of when we had some ice storms here several years back, and people did that as well. Different scenario, but I just thought of that. I was just like, people just left their cars for different reasons.
Stranded it.
Yeah, and just like, I give up, I'm going to go. And usually your car is like the best thing to get you out. And in a situation like that, you can't even get out at that point. So yeah, I think it's so much of this, and the crews down there in LA were just things that we haven't experienced before. We can have an idea, like we said, what we've seen before, but a lot of this is unknown or for the first time. It feels surreal. Another friend said it feels like it's been a year, and guys, it's only the 9th day of 2025, right? We barely said Happy New Year last year, and it feels like it's been so intense. And if you follow the news very closely, like a lot of us do, it's just, I just keep using that word surreal because it just feels like we haven't had time to digest. And remember, we're not even there. So I'm sure all the people down there are even just kind of numb to how everything is going. But I think you try to look for the positives, right? And you look for the helpers in all this. And though we're far away, you mentioned this, we've got firefighters, Red Cross volunteers, many others who we don't even know about, heading down there and helping out in some way. And the firefighters, they couldn't just fly down, they had to bring down their trucks. They made that trek down there. It's been really heartwarming to see all of that, and to see all the efforts to step up, and how California firefighters had helped with Oregon. Yeah. And now they're paying it forward and helping each other. I do hope that can help. I mean, I think that's all that we can do is stay hopeful. Make donations if you can to the Red Cross, because I think a lot of us also want to be like, I want to be there and rebuild, but that's not the time right now. So that money then gets distributed to people who
need the immediate aid.
Hotel stays, clothes, food, things like that. So that's definitely a big way to help. So I know you feel helpless in watching it, but I think that if you are in a place where you can do that great. If you're more of a volunteer person, I have a feeling in the weeks and months to come,
we're going to see a lot of people step up.
Those people who can volunteer instead of donate, I think they'll need you.
And I do want to point out, too, even once the fire crews get the upper hand, they kind of get the containment, we still got to look at the lasting impacts. All of us here in the Pacific Northwest know how impactful the wildfire smoke is. How dangerous it can be as well. We're seeing air quality in the Los Angeles area falling back to that unhealthy category. That will likely be extending for weeks to come.
Really?
Yeah, and especially as we start to see a bit more of an onshore flow, so the winds that come off of the ocean. You got to keep in mind that the Palisades fire is right there along the coast. So all of that wildfire smoke, instead of blowing out over the Pacific, is going to backtrack into Los Angeles. So even though we've been seeing some just truly ominous and apocalyptic views out of Los Angeles, that could potentially become even worse here in the coming days.
And that reminds us of 2020 as well. It was so eerie to just head outside and just see how it looked, because that was September, and so it would be a clear day, but it wouldn't look like it. It would look like it was a January or December day.
Impacting our temperatures even.
Yes, it was so bizarre because, yes, your app would tell you something, and it was a lot cooler than that. And the other thing was, that was during COVID, of course, we all had masks, and then the question was, will my mask be good enough for heading outside? And you couldn't just wear a cloth mask, because on another level, it's those particulates. I'm not a scientist, but from recalling what we were told is that the certain mask that you have, you want a really good mask. And if you've been watching some of those,
tight to the face.
You see the reporters who are giving those reports down there, theirs look different because they're more heavy duty, basically, and it's those particulates.
Almost respirators,
Yeah, it's the particulates from the smoke, and that's what's dangerous, and those kind of masks can prevent it from coming in. So what I was thinking is, like, I hope people will stay in LA, but it's probably hard when you want to go out and see how your home is doing. So I'm concerned that,
or even if you're in the evacuation situation yourself, a mask isn't maybe the top priority to grab when you're trying to get out.
You're not thinking about that. I'm just concerned about health issues, and I hope that, you know, it won't be so bad. But that's certainly a concern because you don't see it, and so you don't think about it, but those things can get into your lungs. So much going on with that air quality, as we know. It's just so devastating. Just like we saw in that Facebook comment. I mean, it's just, you just feel for them. But I think as a country, we look at one another and we try to help during times like this. And I do think that we will continue to lean in. Because you know me, I try to stay positive. And I think that's what we can do.
And I think a lot of people appreciate that too, because when you do see these sites, it is just truly devastating. I mean, just seeing the remnants of somebody's life in pictures like that is just unreal.
And this again is the KTLA shot. I think earlier we had a live shot of the helicopter. Now it's a ground shot. It might be a crew preparing for a report later on, but clearly a home that's not there anymore. Yeah. I want to add that in my experience as being a reporter, having, whether it's like big fire, tornadoes, natural disasters, what you see here and all the images you see, it just doesn't even really come close to what you see when you're standing there.
Because that's just one side of the street. And in a picture like this, looking across the street, a home could be untouched, or in, unfortunately, many cases right now around the Los Angeles area, you look across the street and you can see blocks upon blocks of leveled homes.
Yeah, it's truly hard to take in until you're there. But of course, these images give you an idea. And then it's just the mood of everything. It just feels so different. And if you've been to LA, you know it's a vibrant, beautiful place and filled with heartbreak right now. So we're just hopeful, like so many of you are, that things will improve in the weather conditions. The firefighters are going to get the help that they need. And that made me think of the water issue. That came up. You were explaining with the firefighters, there was concern because they didn't have enough water at one point a couple days ago. And that was something that obviously impacted their work. You said there was something that had to do with the water pressure.
And it's kind of a double side. I've seen reports of not only the water pressure, because you got to keep in mind, every single house is not constantly turning on every single faucet and having it run all at once. That's essentially been the case because the homes are completely gone. And a lot of those pipes are made out of plastic. They melt away. So now the water in each property is just gushing freely. So you don't have that backstop, the pressure buildup to allow for the homes that are still standing to actually have water come out. It maybe just as a trickle. On top of that, there's a lot of the rolling blackouts too, in hopes to prevent new power lines to come down during a wind event, to shut off the power to prevent that, which then is shutting off a lot of the water pumps at a lot of the water facilities. So it really is just a snowball effect of we can't seem to find help in this desperate time as these fires continue to burn. But I do want to take one moment real quick just to kind of take a look at the forecast of what we expect ahead. You can kind of see the black box. So that's the percentage, the relative humidity value. So that's in relationship to our temperature. So when we're talking about 10% humidity, That's not a lot. It's very dry out there. Still picking up on those winds. And again, as we kind of go from the Santa Ana winds to an onshore flow, the unpredictability of where these flames could go continues to increase. Although we want the onshore flow because that will help to increase the humidity values. But as we kind of work our way into tomorrow, still seeing some gusty winds at times, even into Saturday evening, some strong gusts. And that's keeping a lot of Los Angeles all the way down to San Diego under a red flag warning, where those gusts could be anywhere from 50 to 75 miles per hour. Low humidity, again, it's those Santa Ana winds. They warm up, they speed up, they move over desert air, and it moves over into an already dry landscape.
Do they have in the long term, have you looked at the long range forecast? Is there hope for rain or a little bit more humidity? What are you seeing when you look in the long term? Yeah,
an onshore flow will definitely help because it will increase the relative humidity values. We could potentially see that moving into Sunday, and that's actually because of the cold front that's moving through our area tomorrow. And I just kind of show you a little bit of a bigger picture, but I've seen, and it's so hard to say with weather patterns that are like 2 weeks out.
Yes, and this is the reminder, which I'm like, let me say what Josh, all meteorologists, will tell you is that, sure, they can give you that long range. You could pull it up on your computer, ask your favorite meteorologist, but at the same time, things will change.
Yes.
So tomorrow's forecast is way more predictable than next week's, and then 2 weeks out, of course, obviously it gets more challenging. So you take it with a grain of salt to then maybe a pound of salt because
and as you get closer, then the confidence grows.
Yes.
So it may be in 2 weeks, the very end of January, it looks like some colder Canadian air will start to move down, which in turn could kind of stir up the atmosphere and give us some type of moisture. But, you know, this is our rainy season for the West Coast. This is when Southern California, Los Angeles should be picking up on rain, and we just haven't seen that as of late. But it's really kind of this ridge of high pressure that's built over the western half of the country that's dried us out, kept us mild, whereas our friends in the Central Plains, the Deep South, are dealing with brutally cold temperatures, a bit of an Arctic blast, if you would say. And Elizabeth and I are both very familiar with the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and they're picking up on snow today. So it's really a story across the country of fire and ice, unfortunately. But we do have that cold front that will swing through our area to increase that rain potential, hopefully give us a little bit of an onshore flow, but it's that high that still remains over the Pacific that could potentially help to increase those Santa Ana winds, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know a lot of people in California are watching this. If only like that model could go further south and give them that big dose of rain that we get, because I think our rain is going to come overnight and then tomorrow. If only we could just pack that up and just send it down there.
And call for an atmospheric river. That would help everybody out in this situation.
Oh, geez, that is so rough.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this KOIN Now special edition. Again, we were live on KOIN.com, Facebook, and YouTube. Of course, you can catch the latest news updates tonight on The 10 on the CW. And Elizabeth, where can other folks watch us at 11?
Of course, that's on KOIN 6. And then, of course, as you said, as always, at KOIN.com. But we'll be on KOIN 6. It'll be me and my co-anchor, Jeff Gianola. Josh with your forecast. We've got Adam doing sports tonight. And we hope to see you there. Thanks so much for joining us for this. And Josh, thank you for your knowledge because that really helps us understand, the weather conditions and how that can impact things and how unpredictable in some ways it can be, too, with a fire situation. Have a good night, you guys.